Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our next Emerge Live Unfiltered conversation. And let me tell you all, you are in for a treat. You are in for a treat. I cannot wait for us to just jump in and roll with this conversation because let me tell y'all something, okay? This lady right here, Dr. Amber Wright. Doctor. I gotta make sure I say doctor because she just earned that a few months ago, so I'm making sure to honor that. But she really did earn that, and she's truly one of the most amazing communicators and just people in general that I have ever met. But before we dive into this conversation and we get to know more about Dr. Amber Wright, I always say, please introduce yourself as you are coming into the live stream. We like to know who is with us and shout you all out. So as you're coming in, go ahead and share your name, where you're from, what you're doing. We like to, excuse me, we like to make this an interactive conversation. So welcome to our Emerge Live Unfiltered conversations. These are conversations that we are having where we are looking to educate, to motivate, to inspire, and to really have just real talk, real conversations about the things we go through as women, the things that we go through as professionals, the things that we go through as just people, because there's so many commonalities. And we're in a time and space right now where I think it's more important than ever to be connected to like minded people. So we're hoping that by bringing you all these conversations, that it actually encourages you to reach out to other people, to connect to other people, stay connected to us because we have a lot of great things coming up that we want to share, and we want y'all to be a part of. And just so you all know, we have these conversations every Wednesday at 7 p.m., with the exception of next week, and I'll be sharing more about that and what our topic is for next week. But every Wednesday at 7 p.m., we are here and we're live on LinkedIn, we're live on Facebook, we're live on YouTube. I had to think about that. But welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're just joining us, please go ahead and let us know who you are, where you're from, and we're going to go ahead and get this party started. So I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to have Dr. Amber introduce herself because, hopefully no one knows you better than you do, right? So I am Julian B. Kiganda. I am the founder of Emerge Live, which I'll be sharing more about later on, as well as JBK Brand Design, where we are passionate about building culturally relevant brands that bring that soul of the brand to life. So, Dr. Amber, I am going to have you go ahead and introduce yourself and just share more about who you are, what you do, and then we just gonna dive right in.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me first. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Amber Wright, and I am a communication expert, speaker, and executive coach. So, what that means is I work with in my coaching work high achieving, public facing women on the brink of their next level. And in my work as a speaker, I work with companies, corporations, small businesses of all sizes to help. The way that I describe it is I work with organizations who value their people and want to prove it by having healthy communication practices because communication is the way that everything does or does not get done. And sometimes we can go our whole careers and never be accountable for the way that we're showing up communicatively until you
Mm,
encounter me. And so I love my
mhm.
work and what I do. I'm also the founder of Can We Talk Cards, which are 50 questions designed to take the guesswork out of small talk. But I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that later on.
Thank you, Dr. Amber. And let me tell you, I have been so looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
I think one because you're a friend first, but then two because truly, and I said this to you the other day, that you are probably the best communicator that I know. You just have a way with words, and that is not a gift that everybody has. And I just wanted to make sure we got to share your brilliance with everybody.
Thank you.
So, our topic tonight is bold talk, how to speak up and get what you want and deserve. And let me tell you something. We had a lot of RSVPs for this conversation. Because I think it's just communication is something that we all need to, I believe we all have room to improve.
Yeah.
And some of us are better at it than others. And I really am looking forward to you sharing some of your tips to how to speak up, right? To get what you want and deserve. And I do want to also make sure folks know if you have not watched Dr. Amber's TED Talk,
Hmm.
what was the title of the talk?
Ask better questions to build better connections.
Yes. It is a powerful conversation. It's a powerful TED Talk. So make sure that you check that out after this because we about to drop some
Yeah, I'm
nuggets
watching
for
now. Watching
y'all
it afterward.
after this. And if you're just joining us, like I said, make sure you introduce yourself, let us know what your name is and where you're joining from. And we're going to, right, just get into it. We're going to get into it. So let's start with what are, let's say, 3 tips that you can provide for communicating clearly. And actually, let me back up. Let's start
Mhm.
with this because I think people make communication mistakes and they actually don't even realize that they're making a mistake. And then they wonder why they're not necessarily getting the results that they're looking for. So, can you share with us what are some of the most common mistakes women and men make and how can they overcome them?
Well, that's kind of loaded, right? So
Okay, well
because I think that
let's start with communication mistakes. Like when say you're in a professional setting or whether it's a personal setting and there's a certain result that you're looking to get. What do you think some mistakes are that people make, communication mistakes are people make when they're trying to get a certain result from a conversation?
I think gender non-exclusive, right? This irrespective of gender, I think that something
Mm,
that people tend to do is not think in advance about what they want to say, or they think
mhm,
about it so much that it clouds what they're trying to say. I
mhm,
think that that happens to both men and to women. The way that it says here about common what that brought to my mind about common mistakes that women make.
mm,
We do things like hedging. Well, I think it would. I kind of feel we hedge
mm,
the real thing that we're trying to say with the word that waters it down. We use the word
mhm,
like just. Well, I just want to ask you a quick question. Oh,
mm,
or we over apologize for things. Oh, I'm sorry. I just
mm.
have this quick question. And so we do that verbally and also in our written communication as well.
And
Now,
how do you think that's detrimental to how people receive what we're trying to tell them, or especially for the position of leadership or authority, how that can affect people's perception?
because I the problem with that is I think it's born out of a desire to want to be liked.
Mm,
I want you to like me. I want you to think that I'm friendly. I want you to feel comfortable talking to me, which is not a problem. But sometimes I think that women overcompensate with the niceties
mm,
and they for whatever their reasons are there and there are a variety of reasons, especially in the workplace, if we're talking about the workplace specifically,
mhm,
that can contribute to that. So I want to make sure that I name that some things are environmental, particularly if you are a Black woman, a woman of color. People are going to there sometimes people will have a perception of you and they will treat you according to their perception of you without ever really trying to get to know you. So you're
mm.
working against
Yeah.
these preconceived ideas about who you are and who you're not, and that can be
Mhm,
hard to work against in the workplace. But when we find ourselves in a place where we are doing the things like hedging and watering down, diluting what we're trying to
mhm,
say, then that reinforces some of the ideas that people might have about you. And so
mhm,
I think, and again, just a common mistake that people make can be or often is this fear of judgment. And I think that once we're able to really be confident in how we're showing up and how we are communicating, I think that that can be where we can start to see some shifts in the way that we are engaging with people.
mm.
Men do things
That
like over talking, interrupting, some of those things are,
yes,
gender specific in that
yep,
regard.
mhm,
And these also could be considered generalizations. So we'll say not all men do these things
right,
and not all women do these things, not all
mhm,
people do these things, but some we
in
can,
general,
in general, some of those things can apply. But no
mhm,
matter where you land, I think taking the moment to really think about what you're trying to say and being
mhm.
thoughtful about that can be a very quick way to hit the reset button when it comes to the way that you communicate.
I love that. I love that. What do you think is another communication mistake that women make in both their personal and their professional lives. I mean, I can definitely think of ways that I've had to work to improve my communication. I think to
Mhm.
your point, I used to be that person
Mhm.
who I didn't want to offend anybody and oh, if you could just do this. And then I realized that I really wasn't getting the results that I was looking for. It's like people would get to it when they felt like it because they didn't see a sense of urgency or any type of authority in terms of how I made that request. So I definitely can relate to that, and I've had to work on that myself.
Yeah.
Um, what are the communication mistakes? If you can name maybe one or two others that you think women, we'll talk specifically about women,
Yeah.
and if there's any that are general, definitely those. But some of the key communication mistakes I think that people make.
Honestly, for honest and for true, I think with women, it comes down to not telling the truth. We
Mm,
don't tell the truth to
mm,
ourselves. And when you are not honest with yourself, you can't be honest with anybody else.
mm,
And when we are afraid to name what the thing really is,
mhm,
what's really bothering us, what we are
mhm,
really frustrated by, we see this a lot in maybe our romantic partnerships, for example. You never ask for time alone,
mm.
but yet
So
you're
what does that look like? Like if a woman is not telling the truth, what does that look like? I give like
I'm,
an actual.
I'm on my way.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I just want to make sure because I think. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So what that can look like is, sorry, I was starting by saying you never ask for time alone.
Mhm,
And so then you're mad at everyone else because they don't stop and say, "Oh, Julian, do you need some time alone?" They're all
mm,
going about their day, doing what they're doing. The
mhm,
kids are asking for what they're asking for. Your partner's asking for what they're asking for. Your boss is asking for what they're asking for. And while it would be lovely for all of those people to say, "Do you need a minute?" Most times they're not going to do so. So
mhm,
you, my dear friend or person who's listening, woman out there, you have to be willing to say, "I need some time alone. It'll be on this day from this time to this time. These are the accommodations that you all can make in my absence."
mm,
Because the truth is, I need a break.
yes.
That's the truth.
Mhm,
But it's easier
mhm,
to be mad at everybody else for not recognizing that you're not getting what you
yes.
need.
Yes.
So that's an example of how
Agreed.
sometimes that can play out. And then when we go back to these things like hedging, well, it would be nice if I can get a day off, or it would be nice. So now we have all this energy
Mm,
attached to how we're communicating when you really just want to say, "I'm tired, I'm working,
mm,
and I need a minute." When my
yeah.
children were small, I never gave into hiding in the closet, eating my candy bar.
Mhm.
I would eat that candy bar in front of them kids because they would be like, "Mommy, can I have?" No, you cannot. This is mine.
Okay.
So,
That's
they
a good
crawl in
one.
the bathroom, crowding you in the bathroom. I had to teach my oldest when she was about 5. I said, there's such a word called privacy.
Mm.
And mom is asking for privacy. That's when you need a moment to be by yourself. So I'm going to excuse you from the bathroom and I want you to sit outside so I can have my privacy. And then I
Yeah.
will come and join you when I'm done. But it's easy to be like, "Oh, my kids, they take so, oh my God, they're so everywhere." Okay, they are, but you have to be the one to communicate those boundaries.
100%. How would you say that plays out in the workplace?
Principle is the same. Now it's a little bit more nuanced because you're
Mhm.
dealing with, again, environment. Some things are environmental, and some of
Mhm.
those things are beyond your control. So I think in the workplace, remembering that some things are just beyond your control. Some people will absolutely be committed to misunderstanding you,
Mm.
not wanting to work with
Mm.
you and to be
Mm.
collaborative. The best thing that you could do is do and give your best until such
Mm.
time when there is another move that has to be made. So in the workplace, that's where we see a lot of those niceties come
Yes.
through in the email, or again, not really saying how we honestly feel, not
Mhm.
speaking up in the meeting because we think, Bob from across the table is going to interrupt us, or
Mm.
sometimes I think we just simply don't know how to have a hard conversation. I think that is what it really comes down to in the workplace.
Mhm.
So often things get lost in translation because we are afraid to have the hard conversation, and we are afraid to do that in a way that feels tactful
Mm.
without being overly aggressive.
and being labeled as an angry
Angry
black
Black
woman.
woman, correct. Particularly for Black women, that is a
Yeah.
struggle and it is a difficulty. And so I want to make sure that I always acknowledge that and call that out, however it
Mm-hmm.
comes.
Mm-hmm.
As an entrepreneur, I've always said that in my work and in my journey as a business owner, no one is going to care more about my time or my money than me. Nobody.
That's real. That's
No
real.
client is going to be like, "Well, Amber, are you overworked?" There, the,
It's so true.
no one's going to do that. So it's
No.
up to me and it's my responsibility to make sure that when it comes to some of these sales calls, I got to be the one to talk about the numbers.
100%. And that's a hard thing for a lot of women, and not say in general, but I would say especially for women because especially if we've been socialized to be like the good girl and to
Mhm.
be nice and all those things. Being assertive about asking for your value can feel extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah, it can, but you got to do it.
So going into that, what we just talked about, this whole angry black woman thing, or even those who are, not necessarily black women, but also deal with, they don't want to be labeled a certain way in the workplace.
Sure.
How can they speak up without being labeled rude or bossy or angry?
Mm. Story time. Okay. So, I love to tell the story. And I tell the story often when I'm speaking and I'm working with teams in corporate America. And when I was in my early 20s, I worked it was my first like super corporate job
Hmm.
and out of college. And I had a manager. Well, there was a manager on our team. I did not report to her, but we worked together. I worked in human resources and she was a yeller.
Oh gosh.
She liked to yell. When she was angry or frustrated, she liked to yell.
Hmm.
And one day was my turn to get yelled at. I went to her office. I had a file. I can't even recall what I went in there for, but I went in there for something. And she had a question or a concern about whatever the issue was. And she raised her voice at me.
Mm.
And this is a senior woman, both in age and position than to
Hmm.
me. And I stood there frozen because I've seen it happen before, but now it's just my turn.
Happening to you.
And so I said, Amber, you have a decision to make because it didn't feel good to me and it didn't feel right to me the way she
Hmm.
like came at me.
Came at you, yeah.
And so I took a deep breath and I said, Miss Ma'am, uh,
You said Miss Ma'am.
whatever her name, I mean, I know what her name is, but I'm not going to say.
Yeah, I know.
We'll call her Barbara. Barbara, I can see that you're upset. And I think we have two options here. I said, no, I said, first, you don't need to yell because I'm standing right here. I can hear you.
Mm,
First. Second,
mm,
I can see that you're upset. So we have a couple of options here. You can lower your voice and we can continue our conversation, or I'll just go back to my desk and come back at a time when you're no longer angry.
mm.
And I just stood there. Now, I'm like 23, 24.
Look, okay, I just need to pause you right there. And I'm sure there's other people watching who are wondering, probably ask the same, where did you have the self awareness to be able to speak up like that to some at that age? Because at 23, we still figuring out who we are. So
Yeah.
where did that come from, do you think?
I don't know, Julian. I think that, and then that might sound trite, but it's true.
Hmm.
Communication is my gift, and you and I know
Yes,
that. And so,
yes.
it shows up in my work. But long before I was able to name it as a gift, I knew that communication had a way to impact the way that people behave. That's why so
Mm,
I studied speech communication in undergrad, and then in grad school I studied interpersonal communication. So my master's is in interpersonal communication because I was
okay.
fascinated by the way that communication plays a role in people's behavior.
Mm,
And I also learned to pay attention to how I was feeling. It did not feel good to me in my body that this lady was yelling at me. I didn't
yeah,
like it. So I
yeah.
knew I was the only one who could do something about it. That's what I
Mm,
mean about being willing to. I didn't know what that was going to mean for me, but I
yes,
knew I wasn't the one. And I knew today
yes,
wasn't the day. So
yes.
I had to let her know that. But I did so in a way that was very sober and clear and
Mhm.
direct. And
Mhm.
I will never forget the look on that lady's face. Like, I can't believe this little girl came in here.
And said what she
How
said.
dare she give me back what I'm giving out? And would you know, she lowered her voice
Mm.
and she never
Wow.
raised it at me again. Because, hello, I'm
Wow.
not. So now I could have given her all this other stuff. So the question is, how can someone speak up
Yep.
without being labeled bossy or angry? Don't be rude, bossy, or angry. I wasn't any of those things in my in my conversation with her.
Yeah.
Not one.
Yeah.
I was clear
And
and
it
I was
sounds like you actually, and it just kind of leads into the next question because there's actually a process that you use that was very intuitive to you,
Mhm.
but I think we want to spell that out for our viewers because when I what I'm hearing you say is that first you let her know she don't need to do all that. So in a way, you're kind of disarmed her,
Yeah.
right? Like you almost diffused all of that, and you didn't respond to her the same way she responded to you. So it's like she can't even yell at you because you're not raising her voice. And then it's like you gave us an alternate, way to communicate. So let's talk about the process
Sure.
because there are definitely steps. And for those of us who are not intuitive in knowing how to
Mhm.
communicate and really stand up for ourselves in certain situations, how would you outline that for people?
Well, there's a framework for that. We've
I love
all
it.
heard of the no feel do kind of methodology when it comes to relating with people. And my version of that is WSD. I call it the WSD method for clear communication. And I go
Mm,
over this in detail in my sessions and I tell stories about how this came to be. But the WSD method for clear communication is this. First, the W stands for what do I really want?
mm,
What do I really want? And these are questions now, these three questions are questions that you are asking yourself before
mm-hmm,
you engage in whatever this difficult conversation is going to be. And this works at home,
mm-hmm,
at the office, and everywhere in between.
mm,
So here the premise is to practice intrapersonal communication. Are you having
mm,
a conversation? Are you good at talking to yourself? I mean, I do. I talk to
mm.
myself all the time.
Me
Um,
too.
yeah, I talk to myself all the time. So intrapersonal communication is communication with the self. And so
Mm-hmm,
asking yourself these three questions: what do I really want? Like, what do I want out of this interaction? Am I just trying to burn it
mm,
down? Do I just don't value the relationship anymore? So I'm gonna light a match to it and just say whatever I want to say.
right.
Do I want to preserve the relationship? Am I trying
Mm-hmm,
to come across a certain way? So really sitting with yourself to say, what do I really want out of this interaction?
mm-hmm,
Then the S stands for then what am I trying to say? What am I
mm.
trying to say? This is my favorite question because it helps us clear through the clutter in our brains when we are thinking about what to
Yes.
say. Sometimes there's a disconnect between what's happening in our brain and then what comes out of our mouths. So stopping to ask,
Mm-hmm.
what am I trying to say? To me, that's just a real, it's like laser focus and saying, like, well, what I'm trying to say is it really hurt my feelings the other day when I called you and you didn't call me back.
Mm.
Or I what I'm trying to say is, I really miss you when you're always on your cell phone, when you're on your cell phone when we're together.
Yeah. Yeah. And
What
I
I'm
want to interject here real quick because I think what happens with a lot of people, and it goes back to what you said earlier, is that they kind of talk around it. They don't say really what they mean. So
I'll say
somebody, say
this.
you're in a personal relationship and it's like you're coming at your significant other, you're saying everything but how you actually feel and what you're trying to
Mhm.
say. Instead, you complain about, oh, you left your socks on the floor. Oh, you forgot to do this. And you're complaining about everything else for
Yeah.
what the real issue is.
We don't know how to name the thing,
Mhm.
which goes back to what we
Mhm.
were saying earlier. We don't tell the truth.
Yes.
So how it comes
Yes.
out is because it's easier to be like, you always on your phone. You don't ever pay attention to me whenever we together. You
Mhm.
always doing the
Yep.
it's easier to say and do all of that than to say,
Yep.
I miss you. I would like your undivided attention.
Yes.
I feel
Oh.
valued when I have your undivided attention. But that
And
kind of
that's the
vulnerability, a
yes.
lot of people are not comfortable with, but you've got to
Yes.
be willing to name the thing.
Yes.
Otherwise,
And it
we're doing all
actually
this other shit.
changes. Yeah, it really changes the dynamic in the communication when you allow yourself to be vulnerable. Somebody's going to receive you differently when you
Mhm.
say what it really is than when you come at them with everything else but.
Correct. So that
That's
S is
powerful.
what serves that purpose there. What am I really
Mm-hmm.
trying to say? And that
Mm-hmm.
allows you to sit with it so the words can come to you. But if you
Yes.
don't ever ask yourself that question, then you're stuck in the cycle. And I'm a proud overthinker. Oh, if you're an overthinker, you are not alone. I stand with you in solidarity. But what I always like to say, overthinking is my superpower. I do not reject it. I embrace it. And I love that about myself. It's what makes me a good coach.
Mm-hmm.
It's what makes me good at what I do. But what I always like to say is that overthinking is not your enemy. Inaction is.
Mm.
Overthinking is not your enemy. Inaction is. And I use
So
this
explain
example
that. What do you mean by that? Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
when
Go
I'm
ahead.
speaking. I always, so Julie, I'm always going to come through with an example.
I know, but I'm just like, okay, this is just so
So
good. I want to
in a
make sure we
real
get
life
all of it.
practical situation, if I'm going somewhere like the Cheesecake Factory with that massive menu that they have,
Mm.
I'm gonna spend
Mm-hmm.
all night flipping them pages. I'm gonna be like, well, Julian, what you gonna eat? What are they eating over there? Do I want some tacos? Do I want some pasta? Because there's so many options, it can be
Yeah, they
overwhelming to
are.
an
Yeah,
overthinker.
they are.
So
Mm-hmm.
overthinking is not my enemy. Inaction is. At some point, I have to decide on an entree. So now what I do
Mm-hmm.
when I go to such establishments and I look and it's a book of a menu, I'll look through it one time. I will decide on what I feel like having to eat. I will close the menu and put it aside.
Mm.
It's me
Mm.
making the decision and
Making a
moving on.
decision.
When I'm driving to the nail shop, because we love nails over here, do you
Mm-hmm.
want to see an overthinker feel stressed? Tell me to go pick a color with all the colors on the
all
wall.
all of the things in the nail shop. I already know. I know.
Well,
I
I
get
gotta
it.
already feel like, what kind of mood am I in? Do I want a neon? Do I want a green? Do I want a French manicure? Like, how am I feeling? That's an actual
Right.
conversation I have to have with
Absolutely.
myself before I
Uh-huh.
get to the nail shop. Because as soon as I walk in there and they tell me to go pick a color off that wall, I'm stressed. So now I have to decide. I've got to make the decision. And that's what I mean by inaction is your enemy. Overthinking
Mm-hmm.
is not your enemy. Inaction is like you
Interaction.
have to be willing to do the thing, make the decision. So going back to this communicative or communication setting in the workplace, if you know you have that coworker or that colleague or whomever who's just working your nerve or doing you wrong or what have you, either you're going to participate in that
Mm-hmm.
or you're going to participate in advocating for yourself in the best way that you can.
I love that.
And to
I love
close the loop
that.
on this WSD method, because we didn't get to the D. So we have,
Yep.
what do I really want? What am I trying to say? And then what do I want them to do? What I wanted that woman to do was to stop yelling at me. That's what I wanted. For her to
Mm-hmm.
know, don't play me. Don't try it. We're not doing
I ain't the one. You're like, I ain't the one. Mm-hmm.
it. Okay, not today on this year of our Lord. So I had that's what I wanted. That was the outcome. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to show up. Now, obviously, I didn't know this then. Okay. So
Yes.
this is looking back in hindsight, but how this ends up playing out. This gives
Mm-hmm.
you an opportunity now for us to move and advance forward. So in the future, it would
Mm-hmm.
be so say I was confronting her on the yelling in a different way. Moving forward, it would be helpful to me if you didn't raise your voice when we had conversations like this in the
Yes. That's powerful.
So
That's
now we're not
powerful.
just spinning anymore. It's now we're kind of coming into an agreement about how we want things to go and to unfold
Mm-hmm.
moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
What do I really
Mm-hmm.
want? What am I trying to say? And what do I want them to do? And that helps you then communicate. Like this would be helpful. This shows that you value and that you care about the dynamic. I'd
Absolutely.
love
A
for us to
hundred
work
percent.
together on this in the future, or for both of us even to lower our voices the next time we have an argument.
Yeah. So to me, it sounds like it's about being collaborative versus combative.
It can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a conflict style.
Mm.
Accommodating,
Mm.
there's accommodating, avoiding. Um, gosh, there's 5 of them, and they're all escaping me. But one of them is
Yeah.
competing, and then one of
Mm.
them is
Yes.
compromise, and one of them is collaborating. Collaboration is like that's the ideal goal, but it's the hardest to achieve.
Mm. Why do you think that's the hardest one to achieve? Why is collaborating the hardest one to achieve?
Because it requires both of us. So compromising means that both of us get something out of what. Okay, so it's time to go out to eat. You want Chinese, I want Italian. So the compromise is, okay, this Friday we'll go get Chinese. Next Friday we'll go get Italian. Collaborating is, how can we find a way that make us both happy right here in this moment, right now? And that's what's hard to do, because it takes more work to do that. So that in this kind of situation, now we have to pick a new restaurant altogether. Now we need to go get Jamaican tonight and try something new, that we were working together. The problem becomes ours. So in conflict, and this is another discussion for another day, because conflict unto itself is its own thing.
It's its own thing.
The true nature of conflict is that there is an expressed struggle. Expressed meaning that it is named. So if you are not naming what the issue is, then the problem is solely yours. It is not your husband, your daddy, your mama.
And that goes back to what you said about telling the truth. If you're not willing to tell the truth and say what you really want, you cannot blame other people for not delivering on that. And I think what happens is we then become passive aggressive, which for me is a communication style that just drives me bonkers. I can't. Like, that drives me crazy. Like, say what you want, say what it really is. Like, don't ignore me. Don't, speak in what do they call it?
Riddles.
Just say what it is. But I think, excuse me, I think that method is just so powerful, because it really forces you to take a step back and think about, what is it that you want. A lot of times we may know what we want, we're just afraid to say what it really is, right?
Yes.
And then on top of that, we're afraid if we say what we really want, we don't know if we're going to get it or not.
Yes.
But the issue is, if you never say what you want, then you really never going to get it.
My mama used to say the answer is already no if you don't ask.
Listen,
the answer is already no if you don't ask.
100%. 100%. Oh my gosh, Amber, this is why you are Dr. Amber Wright. Okay, like, I love this method because it really is simple, but it also forces you to pause and think. And I'm going to be using this more in my relationships, because I can think of a situation where this would have come in really handy not that long ago. So
we'll talk about that afterward.
Oh, listen. But I do want to make sure we talk about these fantastic cards that you have. I'm going to pull it up here, because I absolutely love your Can We Talk cards. And let me just say this before you really talk about them. I'm going to give my own story. So when you first came out with these Can We Talk cards, I bought a set, and I think it was for kids, the set for kids or for teens. I forgot what it was called.
Yep.
And this was around when my daughter was probably like 13 or 14, getting to those teenage years, and you're trying to find ways to communicate and speak the same language, and, make sure she's not speaking French while you're speaking Greek.
Yes.
And let me tell you something. I remember using those cards. I cannot tell you how much they actually improved our conversations, because it was no longer about, oh, how was your day? How was school? What did you eat? But like those typical questions, these were really thoughtful questions that actually force people to really think. And not only that, here's the thing: people love talking about themselves.
They do.
So if you ask certain questions that stimulate, their excitement, oh, I get to share, it can really change the dynamic of a relationship. So I would love for you to just talk a little bit about the Can We Talk cards, why you came up with them. I put up here where people can find them, but just talk a little bit about those cards.
And thank you for that feedback. When you told me that then, it really meant so much to me. Anytime people tell me about how they are experiencing the product or having these conversations, it just makes my heart smile, because that was my intention. And so why I created them is because I recognize that what it means to communicate means different things to different people. How we're raised, how we're not raised, cultural differences, backgrounds, all of that. Some folks are raised in homes where children are meant to be seen and not heard. Some people are raised in homes where children are allowed to be vocal. What it means to communicate means something different to all of us. And what I have found in my work over the last 20 some odd years that I've been doing this is that a lot of times it's not so much that people don't want to communicate, they just don't know what to say. They just don't know what to say. So Can we talk cards? This is my commercial. Like I
Yes.
said, they take the guesswork out of small talk. And so there are 5 editions. There's the kids edition that Julian mentioned, and these are not just for parents. I describe them as cards for people who spend time with children. So that could be
Mm,
teachers, that could be aunties, grandmas, whomever.
yes.
These are really good to really get into to step into their world a little bit, and kids love these because they treat them like playing cards and they do all kind of stuff with them. And so those are really great. We've got the social edition when you're at parties and at events and
I
you're
love
networking with
that.
people. You are a person who leans toward introversion and networking events overwhelm you. Take 3 of these, screen, take a picture of 3 of these cards, and then say, I'm going to have 3 intentional conversations with people that are here.
Mm,
I'm going to
I
meet three
love
new,
that.
so that way I can go home with my, and once you hit your quota, go home. We have the couples edition for people who are in love, want to be in love, trying to get to know somebody. These are very helpful for that. As somebody who has been in a long-term partnership, it'll be 20 years together. This is very
Yes.
married. These were born out of a lot of trial and error. Okay. After really
Mm,
know this person. And this is the office edition. So if you lead teams, you manage groups, you want to engage with folks, having a quick icebreaker at the beginning of your calls. A lot of my clients now are really grappling with remote work, and that is
mm,
that is where we are now. And how do we
yeah.
foster a sense of community, connectedness, and camaraderie amongst people? These are really great for that. And finally, we have the womanhood edition, designed by
Yes.
our very own
Hey.
Brand Design. Julian designed these cards. These are questions that I describe as 50 questions I wish I had asked my grandmother before she died, to really get to
Mm,
know her as a woman. So if you're really seeking intimacy, I should have named this the intimacy edition because they are really good for
yes.
women.
Oh,
And
they're intimate. Oh,
yeah,
I can attest to that. There's some questions in there that this is not, those are not necessarily the kind of questions you ask in public. Now, these are like, some of these are very private questions.
correct. But again, I want to make it easier for people to sit down and have meaningful conversations. And sometimes that looks like pulling one of these cards, and then that leads to 3 or 4 or 5 more questions.
Yes.
And I had a woman
Yes.
tell me once that she had bought a deck. I think it was the social edition. It wasn't even the couples deck. And she was out on a date with a man. And she said she wasn't sure. I was like the second or the third one, but she was like, I don't really know. And right when she was getting ready to check out, she was like, oh, you know what? I got these cards in my purse. So he
Uh-huh.
pulled 2 and she pulled 2. And she said, Amber, we closed the restaurant just from
Wow.
the conversations that sprouted from those 4 questions. And that's what I
That,
love about it. And they're on sale. Buy one, get one half off right now.
hey,
You can go to
I love.
canwetalkcards.com.
But you know what? I think that just speaks to the power of intentional communication,
Absolutely.
because we communicate all the time. Don't mean that we're very intentional with our words, and that's actually one reason I love the book, The 4 Agreements, because it says be
Mm,
impeccable with your words. And
mm,
to really be impeccable with your words means to do those things that you said, mean what you say what you won't, do all the things so that you can actually get what you want and deserve.
absolutely.
I love that, Dr. Amber. And listen, let me just tell you all, first of all, thank you, Amber, because I think that you have helped so many people, not even just on this live, but just through your work.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. And I also want to make sure you all who are watching know that Dr. Amber Wright is actually going to be one of our speakers at our upcoming Emerge Live experience. Oh my gosh, you all. You think this was anything? Wait until you join us this April 2024, April 19th to the 21st, 2024, in National Harbor, Maryland, at the Gaylord. If you have never been there, it is right on the Potomac River. Huge window that looks out on the water. One of the most beautiful spaces, I believe, in the DMV, the DC area.
Mm,
Registration is now open, so make sure you go to emergelifeexp.com. It's going to be an incredible experience, you all. Like, we started announcing speakers, so make sure that you follow us at Emerge Live EXP on all platforms. Um, in addition to Amber, let me just tell you all, we just have amazing things planned for you. But really, the intent of this experience is to elevate and uplift visionary Black women and help you uncover purpose and rediscover joy because we have been through some things. And as Amber was talking, we're dealing with a lot of isolation because of this work from home and that whole thing. So we're not as connected. So we're really creating this safe space for women to just reconnect with one another, to uncover purpose and rediscover joy. That is our theme for this year because listen, you all, we have been through it. So many of us have been through it. And we need a space where we can literally, as Amber was talking about, just be vulnerable, be in a safe space, be around like minded women who are actually there to support you. And it's about collaboration and connection and not competition. So we're super excited. We have some major speaker announcements coming this month. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But I encourage you to get your ticket today. We expect it to sell out. Like it's going to be an incredible experience. We have things like the Creative Visionary Lounge, where you're going to get to create a new vision for your life. We have our Chic Boutique, where we are bringing some amazing vendors and products that are inspiring, that are uplifting. And the Can We Talk cards will be in that Chic Boutique. So if you don't grab them online, you can grab them at the experience. And of course, we're going to have fun, you all. We're going to have a DJ, we're going to have incredible sessions. And it's really about addressing our whole selves, right? Because I think so many of us are just tired of showing up one way at work and then being something completely different in your personal life. So we're having one day of personal development, one day of professional development, because we want you to be able to show up fully as who you were created to be. So go to emergeliveexp.com if you're interested in being a sponsor, a vendor, a partner. We are building this incredible platform and we want it to be a space where even beyond the event, we are supporting you in pursuing your goals, your dreams, and just really creating a community that is connected, that is authentic, and where you can rediscover joy. So we just want to encourage you, take everything that Amber has shared, start using it in your own life and looking at how you can implement some of those skills. And I promise you, like I know from my own experience in improving my communication skills, it's improved my relationships, right? But I think to your point, Amber, it has to be where both people are committed to the relationship, to improving the relationship. Both people have to be committed to changing how they communicate. And both people just have to be committed to becoming better, because part of improving your communication is about becoming a better person.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right about that.
So I just want to thank you all for joining us. And just one more thing, but wait, there's more.
Do we have any
Um,
questions before we leave?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. I was actually going to get to that if people have any questions, but please go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. If you have any questions for Amber, make sure you post those in there, and we'll make sure to answer them. But real quick, before you all go out, as I mentioned, we have these talks every week on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Except for next week. Next week is going to be on Thursday, and we have the event up on all of our platforms, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So you can go ahead and RSVP so you can get notified. And we're going to be talking about embracing disruption, how to find clarity in chaos. Because I've heard of so many people who have lost jobs, who are going through a divorce, who have had to shut down their businesses. And how in the world, in all of that chaos, do you find your way out of that and turn that chaos into opportunity? So we have an incredible speaker, Viola Llewellyn, who will be joining us next week. She calls herself the manifesting generator. So she'll explain what that is when she joins us. But make sure to join us if this was useful for you, if this inspired you, if you're going to take these tips and apply them into your own life. These are the kind of speakers we have every week, you all. And I always say, make sure to bring your notebook and take notes because all of our speakers drop gems. And I promise you, if you only implement one thing from this live, it will influence and impact your life. So thank you all for joining. Let me see if there's any questions. Here we go. There's a question. So Ubon wants to know, can we talk cards, office edition? Can this be used for business meetings and how? That's a great question.
That is a great question. And the answer is yes. And the how is up to you. I specifically say that they are not a game, they are a communication tool. You can use them as the game, or you can use them, like I was saying earlier, as an icebreaker in meetings. So that could look like I tried to make sure that these were appropriate for the work environment. Okay.
Yes, we know what that means.
This question is, what is the biggest professional challenge you are facing right now? Everybody at the table is going to give you a different answer. Some of it's going to have to do with the role that they're in, or it could be, wanting to get out of here, look for a new job, right? Like you never know what kind of discussions can come out of this. And really, I see these as an opportunity, especially if you are a manager and you have one-on-ones with your team. These can be a really great way to get to know them and treat them as people and not just workers.
That's powerful because a lot of times we don't really take the time to get to know our coworkers. I think it's about a means to an end, and it's like your work life is separate from your personal, and that's fine.
That's fine.
But it doesn't mean that you can't improve the communication and the relationships with the people that you work with. So, thank you for that. Thank you for that question, Ubong. And we have another question from Sylvia.
We have 5. There's 5 different editions in total. So kids, couples, office, social, and womanhood.
So she thought of everything, you all. And again, I'm gonna put it back up there in terms of where you can find the cards, the Can We Talk cards.com. So make sure to get your set, you all. Like I said, I bought a set and it improved, at least in that moment. We have other stories about what happened after that, but in that moment, it really improved. It improved the communication with my daughter. So I highly, highly recommend these cards. And then here's another question from Ubong. How do I get it in Ghana, West Africa? That's a great question.
That is a fantastic question. That is not impossible. But we currently ship to the continental US.
So this is what I'm going to suggest, Amber. How about he connects with you on LinkedIn?
Yes.
Connect with Dr. Amber Wright on LinkedIn, and I'm sure she can find a way. I mean, who knows? That might be a whole nother
Correct.
market for you right there. So,
Correct.
if you're interested in being a distributor, Ubong, I mean, hey, that might be a conversation. That might be another conversation. I'm just saying. Exactly. But thank you for that. Before we log off, we just wanted to see if there's any other questions for Amber or for myself. Um, and again, I really want to thank you, Amber, for just sharing your brilliance and all these amazing tools that you have for us to um, improve our communication and build better relationships. So, and that's a great question. Can he get a soft copy? So maybe a PDF download.
Yeah, they are not digital at the moment, but message me and we'll talk about it after the session.
Yeah. She said, okay. He said, okay, thank you. Awesome. So I think just from those questions, I think that tells you that this is a global need, right? It's not just something that we need here in the continental United States. I think communication and improving communication is a universal thing. So Dr. Amber, I want to consider like multiple languages at some point.
Yes, I have thought about that, especially with my family being from Central America. My mother she's bilingual, she speaks Spanish. So I have thought about that in terms of cross cultures because we all, irrespective of background, we're all seeking that. I always say, do you see me? Do you hear me? And do you value me? Those 3 questions are what frame the human experience. Everyone is asking that of us, and we are asking that of everyone else. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Do you value me? And race, color, or creed, we're all asking the same thing. So
we're all asking the same thing. So you all, thank you again for joining us. Please go ahead and share because this is actually recorded, and you can share the recording. So if this had value for you, share it with somebody else. Share it with your group. Share it with your coworkers, your family members who might be helped by what we just shared here, because these are our gems, and our goal is to always help you leave better than you came. So, y'all have a great night. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week, Thursday, for our next conversation about how you turn chaos into clarity. Have a good night,
Awesome.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.